we're getting to that point that people have been excited for. But the hardest thing about doing the Final Fantasy XIV thing, and I am so happy you guys unlocked me checking this out, because it should be clear, for years I've been shown Final Fantasy XIV. Years! And every time I looked at it, I was like, this is weeb nonsense. Like, it's not for me. Like, as if World of Warcraft was hardcore. I know, I was that judgy guy. But going towards Heavensward, which is their next expansion, every step of the way it has been a case of, you have to do this. Like, you have to see this thing. So that might be clubbing. And then one of those things was Hildibrand. And another one of those things was the Extreme Primals. And I'm glad to say, we've done both of them. Let's talk about that journey. So before we get into the Hildibrand thing, which I know FF14 fans are probably like, what did you think? Did it ruin it for you? I'm sure that's what you're thinking. It's like, did it ruin it for you? We'll get there in a second. But let's talk about the Primals. So the Primals was something I was very excited by. And for our WoW fans out there, the Primals are individual boss arenas, very similar to something like Onyxia, where they are story-based. So you do have to do them, but they give you like an LFR, very simple version to do during the story mode, very puggable. You should one-shot it, shouldn't be a problem. Little bit of mechanics going on, nothing too deadly, but they were very cool. One thing that's always stood out to me, even since before we started playing FF, was the bombastic nature of the boss fights. Ridiculous music, especially now a lot more guitar and stuff has been brought in, mixed with orchestral music, and just the style and theme of the fights. Once you get over the UI, which is still not ideal. Remember, it was made for consoles. And I will always, I know there's been a lot of FF14 gushing, but it should be said, it's still an antiquated look to the game, and that's something I've got past, because once you don't see that anymore, very similar with most games, you just don't take that information in anymore. You actually get the scale of the fights going in. The Primals were pretty fantastic, because they're so varied. I had everything from a man with an enormous beard who shoots lightning from the sky, a man riding a dead horse, right through the arena, to giant rock monsters, to enormous wind monsters, and then moving on to bigger things like the Leviathan, that's a huge water snake living in the water, all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of the Primals. And then what you can do, which is what we mentioned in a previous video, is you can turn that fight up to the extreme. After you've done it on the story mode, which I would leave for a raider, for sure, a dissatisfied experience in terms of mechanics and gameplay, because it's, you know, it's designed to be beaten. They then give you the option to do it on the harder version. They then unlock it and say, look, there is the extreme version. The beast has returned. We don't know why, we don't know how, but it's here and it's harder this time. And then you can also do something which is called minimum item level and no echo. So I should explain that just to be clear on this. So minimum item level will set your character to the character it should have been at that point in time. So dissimilar from World of Warcraft Time Walking, where they essentially just have your character, but your spells and abilities do less damage, but your character plays the same. In FF, they reduce your character to what it should have been, or as close as possible. It's not exact. What it should have been at level 50, and the cap currently is level 80, I believe. I haven't reached the cap. So that means if you gained spells at level 51, you don't have those spells, and the same for the rest of the spells. So you can do that, and it also attunes your item level to the appropriate item level you should have been when you were at this level of the game, right? So it reduces your item level back down as well. On top of that, you can have something called No Echo. No Echo is basically determination for our WoW fans out there. As people die, you get stronger, so you can overcome the challenge, and essentially these two things make the fight easier if you want to go back and farm them for transmog and things like that, and mounts. So what we decided to do was Extremes, which is the hard mode, turn on minimum item level, so our characters get shrunk down to the appropriate HP pools and damage output, and no echo, so we're not getting buffed if we fail. So essentially we're doing it as close as humanly possible to what it should have been like then. And this is miles and away so much better than Time Walking, because it is as close as damn it to doing it in its original form, despite the fact the game has progressed much, much more. And you get to have a reasonably authentic experience. And you guys know that for the longest time how excited I was about Time Walking when it was announced in World of Warcraft, and then we got in there and it was much, much easier. Did not represent how it was at the time, and it was kind of like a nostalgia experience as much as anything. Not that it was particularly bad, but it just wasn't like reliving that situation, which I think a lot of us were hoping for. Certainly with things like the Burning Crusade Time Walking and Wrath of the Lich King Time Walking, it's like, oh, that would be cool. But we are, obviously, World of Warcraft is getting Legion Time Walking with Vic Plus, and we'll see how that goes, and the same with Mage Tower, and all that kind of stuff going in there. But this is the experience I had this time. So the primals, as you can probably imagine, there are several of them, were a really mixed bag. A really mixed bag. The initial ones that I did were Garuda, which was really cool as an introductory one. Took us about 40 minutes to kill. Nothing too difficult, but it was a really fun experience to actually have to experience the mechanics, to actually have to counter what the boss is doing. You can't just outlive everything. You actually have to play it out properly. And then moving through them all, we ended up doing ones that were super hard. I will tell you now, the hardest one I dealt with was actually Ifrit. Ifrit was super, super difficult for our group. Maybe it was just the nature of our group or whatever it might have been, but that took us like 5-6 hours and it was a monster of a fight. Was not my best fight though. It was not my best fight at all. My best fight goes to Ramuh. Now, some of you are going to go, oh, because it's the hardest one. Well, I just told you Ifrit was the hardest one. Ramuh was not the hardest one. We killed it in about 3 hours. But traditionally, amongst the FF community, Ramuh is known as being the most difficult fight. That's not what got me at all. In fact, difficulty is very rarely what makes a great fight for me. And I think we could look back to our video on Muru. Muru was an exceptionally difficult fight when the Sunwell was current. But I hate that fight. Like, difficulty does not mean a good fight. I love difficult content. You guys know I'll smash my face into it all goddamn day. But it's not what makes a fight great. And you can look to our World of Warcraft videos on my greatest boss encounters. They're not the most difficult by a long way. It takes a lot more. It takes the spectacle. It takes the setup. It takes so many factors in order to make a great fight. So I did want to talk about Ramuh a bit. Why did I love Ramuh? It was a slightly different take on how a lot of the primal fights go. As we know, Final Fantasy raiding is a lot more about the dance, because the gameplay is not World of Warcraft. It's not. So they work on the fact that you should work as a team and a lot of individual responsibility and things like that. But often that comes to dancing a little bit. That is very clear, and it doesn't annoy me as it does in World of Warcraft, because this style of raiding suits Final Fantasy, does not suit World of Warcraft for me. And we talked about that last video, how the raid style is very different, but better because it fits into this mold. We're not trying to shove the wrong thing into the right mold. So, Ramuh, I loved this fight. I love this fight because it's just like 4 reasonably difficult mechanics, but not too difficult. So we have 2 people being targeted, big red marker. They're going to be mind controlled, but they have to be broken by somebody else getting a different debuff where they have a blue ring around them and they're going to shoot lightning off. So you have to spot your friends, which could be anybody in the group, getting targeted with this thing. Then you have to coordinate with another person who's getting the debuff, and it's not everybody, so you can't guarantee it, to go and clear them. While that's going on, you're going to have lasers shooting across the platform from these ads that have a tremendous amount of HP. There is a DPS check, so you have a long time. And this is where endurance raiding comes in for me. And it's one of the things that I've kind of enjoyed for a long time, where it's not a slog. It's just you've got to keep your head on your shoulders for a reasonably long period of time, while still doing something relatively complicated, but not too complicated with just DPSing ads. All the while, you're watching out for your friends. You've also got to watch out for the position of everybody else. We also had to collect orbs, and you've got to coordinate. So this was the first fight. I think this is what really struck me, that required loads of communication, and that is my heart and fucking soul, man, is where the team is constantly having to talk back and forwards and adjust, and so your tanks are letting you know how they're doing and what they need to do in 30 seconds, while your raid is trying to coordinate what they're doing in 30 seconds, while what's happening now is slightly different, and we need to get the timers right because this is a long fight. And even when you get to the end of the fight, that's still going to be like 4 or 5 minutes of stuff going on while it's gradually getting more intense and working on it, but it's not complicated, so you've got to stay cool, you've got to relax and say, guys, we've got like 4 or 5 minutes here. Don't stress out because we're in the final phase, which a lot of people do in raiding, is they get to that last phase or that execute phase and like, go, 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 and they fuck everything up. You've got to really work on it and just be like, just chill, we've got a long way to go. Let's just manage what we're doing, keep doing what you're doing. Just let it happen, just take care of each other. And the fact that it required so much back and forth with the raid, magnifique. Absolutely loved Ramuh. My worst fight, I'll let you know now, was Shiva. Shiva took us less than 20 minutes to kill. Unfortunately, it was the last primal that we did. The reason I didn't like it is I did it after Ramuh. So I did Ramuh and then went straight to Shiva, which is a by leaps and bounds easier fights. It's a lot less interesting, although it's got fantastic music, it's got all this wonderful stuff going on. It just wasn't very interesting at all. And in fact, on the kill, I think my brain like checked out. I was fine on every progress pull, but on the kill itself, I died like 5 times. I was completely checked out of the fight. I was like, this is not for me. This is not for me. But that was the only primal that I felt that way. The rest of them were all right up there with being really cool, including Leviathan, which was super fun. Came down to avoiding these dives, which are very quickly telegraphed, and doing all those kind of things. But as it stands right now, every primal is defeated on extreme with minimum item level, no echo. That's fantastic. Let's move on to the other stuff then. So as I said, on Twitter and Discord and every other means of communicating me with there was so many messages like, make sure you don't miss this. So one of them was like the Primals Extremes. Make sure you do Coils. It's their first proper raid. Make sure you go and check that out. And the other one that kept popping up was, I wonder if you'll do Hildibrand. Now, of course, I don't know what Hildibrand is. And in fact, the amazing thing is, the audience has not spoiled anything for me, and I love you guys so much for this. They'll just be like, you should probably go and get this quest over there. Smile. And it's become a bit of a meme in the community, as if I put out a rhetorical question like, I wonder if this is a bad person, or this is a good person, or a double cross is coming. There's just a wall of smiles, because no one wants me to know the answer, and I don't want the answer either. So it's come really, really cool with that kind of mechanic. And one of them was Hildibrand. So I need to explain Hildibrand. If you've not played, or you've just started, I know several of you have just jumped into FF14, stop watching now. You don't want to be spoiled on this, because it's incredibly weird, incredibly wonderful. It's not going to be for everybody, but it's one of those things you go and check out, and if you dig it, you're going to have a good time with it. If you don't dig it, you'll know in the first 10 minutes, and you can go on, because it's a side quest. It's not story related in terms of the main story. You can go and do it as a side thing, a side project. So what is Hildibrand? Well, it's like they just decided to put Ace Attorney into the game. And for those of you who haven't seen Ace Attorney, check out our video on Ace Attorney and what it is. It's completely over the top. It's extremely Japanese. It's full-on ridiculousness. Like, there's a lot of FF that's ridiculous. This is way more ridiculous than anything else that's in FF. And it's done in a really playful, fun way. To the point where I know some people thought I was going to hate this, and it was like, this is going to turn him off. But if you... I went with, I'm going to embrace this, and it's done in literal cases, like an attorney game. So there's like an entire... And this is the first time, actually, they basically remove you from the game. You're there, and you're taking part in it, and you're pushing the quest forwards by clicking on the quest. But you practically might not exist. It's about the characters in the cases. And they're reoccurring characters that come and go. And it's one of those where you see a character from maybe case number 1, returning case number 4, and you just go, oh my god, no. But like in a happy way, like, no way is this dude back. How is this dude back? And what they do is they take these characters and turn them up to 13, 14. They really camp it up. Very campy. Very ridiculous. Slow-mo cutscenes of One Punch Man type running and all this kind of stuff going on. And I have to say, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Especially because I've been doing a lot of the voice acting for the characters and trying to put a voice to these characters as I see them. And just enjoying that. So we might have somebody like Godbert, for example, who is the most ridiculous character. But for me, he was completely over the top. He was super camp. I know people are like, no, this guy needs like a chat voice. He's like super amazing and wonderful. I'm like, he's not, man. He's not. He's wearing underpants. He can beat any creature. He can jump into a moon. This guy is like, but he's also a blacksmith. He's like Wreck-It Ralph, but the other guy in Wreck-It Ralph, he can repair anything. He's just completely over, he's always covered in oil, so he's completely ridiculously over the top, and he's camp in my mind. That's how I'm seeing him, whereas this guy is really trying to be like, oh, I'm gonna kill you. This other character, but he's kind of useless in many ways, so he's kind of dumb. So like, I'm gonna kill you, trying to be a hard guy and all this kind of stuff. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I think my favorite character in that was actually turned out to be the bizarre love situation between Inspector Brian. I know he's not called Inspector Brian, but that's what I named him, and Ellie from the Mithril Eye newspaper. How they were like shipping each other early on, and there's twists that happen, and you're like, oh, and then he kind of comes back later, and you're like, oh, go on. If you embraced it, which I did fully embrace it, the ridiculous nature of it, and I do that quite a lot. Is okay, let's accept this premise and let's roll with it and see how it goes. certainly not for everybody. I think that was wonderful. And it's been one of the more fun experiences I've had here. I know many people, as we are approaching Heavensward now, would like to know about this post-ARR content. We talked about it in a previous video about how awful it had been perceived. And I did talk about the cutscene involving Yugiri and Thancred, which was completely over the top and took me out of it. That was more of like a Hildibrand cutscene. And I was very worried that was going to continue because it did kind of break where my mindset was for a little while. I'm glad to say the rest of it doesn't carry on that way. It was really cool. And all this, like I don't know how many it is. People keep trying to tell me it's like 180 quests or something, where you don't really get experience when you have to do it in order to progress the game. And I 100% understand why people hate this, because your character kind of comes to a stop and you've just got to go through story. And certainly if you are somebody who's skipping quest dialogue, it's so much traveling with very little gameplay. But I've really, really enjoyed the story. I've absolutely enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the Lady Iceheart storyline, the Crystal Tower storyline. I've enjoyed every part of it, and including now Midgard Soma, the sleeping dragon of nightmares, essentially. All this kind of stuff. I've enjoyed every step of it, so it's been fine for me. That's all I can say. I totally get, though, for anybody who's just trying to be like, okay, I finished A Realm Reborn, which would be the equivalent of vanilla WoW. I want to go to the Burning Crusade now, which is obviously Heavensward, and I can't. I have to do all the story and patches that came out in ARR, but for no experience and no gear. This is really tedious. Well, I totally get that. As somebody who really couldn't give a shit about my level or reaching Heavensward at any particular pace, I'm not trying to beat the game before Endwalker comes out. It's been fantastic. Absolutely thoroughly enjoyable. The twists and turns that have gone on with Captain Inbred and all those kind of... I've enjoyed the hell out of it, so it's been fine for me. It's been absolutely fine, so no worries there. Well, that is where I'm up to now. And, yeah, I mean, every time I make a video on FF, I'm like, hey, I'm really happy. It's such a fun game. So there you have it. All primals defeated, all weird and wonderful storylines completed as well. The last thing I have to do, and a little spoiler for the upcoming video, is Coils. This is their big raid. This is the actual raid. Not a trial, not a duty, an actual raid. And, spoiler alert, I have done a little bit of this, but I think you're going to be excited for the next video, is that you can see they tried to copy a World of Warcraft raid, and then they so quickly change the direction of how they go based on how their raiding mechanics work. So I'm excited to talk about that as well. As always, these videos are sponsored by you guys. So if you want to come over to our website, preachgaming.com, $1 saves us all the lost ad revenue that we get from this channel, and it would be amazing. So I'll see you again, guys. Bye-bye.